Exactly. So 6
And
months.
the other thing is now there is mutation of the COVID.
Yeah.
I don't know whether these vaccines will work or not. Okay, shall I start again?
Yes.
Okay, with communicative language teaching. I want to keep it brief because I'd like to show you some examples from textbooks, how we apply it, and also some examples of skill-based language teaching as well. Communicative language teaching can be understood as a set of principles about the goals of language teaching, how learners learn a language, the kinds of classroom activities that best facilitate learning, and the roles of teachers and learners in the classroom. And we had, I talked about traditional approaches and all other things. Let me skip it. Communicative language teaching is found in the changes in the British language teaching tradition, dating from late 1960s. A lot of British linguists contributed to the formation of communicative approach, which aims to make communicative competence by Del Hymes. That's very important concept, communicative competence. The goal of language teaching and develop procedures for the teaching of the four language skills that acknowledge the interdependence of language and communication. And today we use, CFR, which means Common European Framework Reference for Languages, which is also based on communicative language teaching. Communicative competence is what a speaker needs to know in order to be communicatively competent in a speech communication. So we try to build communicative competence with our students so that they'll be able to survive. It could be survival initially, but later on we hope that they are going to improve at the desired level. Richards and Rogers describe CLT as an approach rather than a method, since it represents a philosophy of teaching that's based on communicative language use. Advocated by many applied linguists, CLT in their views emphasizes notional functional concepts and communicative competence rather than grammatical structures as central to teaching. The major characteristics are: meaning is primary, contextualization is basic, so everything should be taught, practiced, and produced within a context. So usually, in direct method or in traditional method, teacher says, this is simple present tense, and everybody make a sentence. I mean, this is wrong, because in our daily life, no one asks you to make a sentence with simple past, simple present, etc. So that's going to be really odd to say to Osama, make a sentence with present perfect. Why should he do it? I mean, there's no such a communication. And sometimes some students, when I ask a question, they ask me, which tense am I going to use? Well, do you ask your mother which tense you are going to use in order to answer a question? No, just, answer however you feel. Don't be scared. So making mistake is really a big problem with students, especially in the exams. Why? Because the teacher deduces marks. Then we should give students such tasks that we should not deduce their marks because of grammar or because of interlanguage problems. This is very important, especially with A1, A2, and B1 levels. And material sequencing is determined by the content, meaning, and function. And L1 is acceptable when feasible. Students can add some words. And adjectives, activities and strategies for language are varied. And communicative competence is the goal of instruction. In theory of learning, Harms view, a person who acquires communicative competence acquires both knowledge and ability for language use with respect to whether something is formally possible, whether something is feasible in virtue of the means of implementation available, and whether something is appropriate in relation to a context in which it is used and evaluated. So whether something is in fact done, actually performed, and what is doing entails, which means Canal and Swain, his students, identified 4 dimensions of communicative competence, and in our classrooms, we should try to improve students' communicative competence within this perspective. Of course, comprehensible input, I mean, meaningfulness, they are very important, but in order to have them to improve communicative competence, They are going to improve grammatical competence, which is normal, but the focus is on communication. Sociolinguistic competence is important, which refers to an understanding of the social context in which uh, communication takes place, including roles, relationships, the shared information of the participants, and the purpose for their interaction. And discourse competence is another competence that we use in our daily life. It refers to the interpretation of individual message elements in terms of cohesion and coherence. And strategic competence, which means the learners should be able to use them to coping strategies to initiate, terminate, maintain, repair, and redirect communication by using their verbal and non-verbal elements. And some of the characteristics of communicative view of language is, we said, primary function of language is for interaction and communication. So language is a system for the expression of meaning. And the activities that truly communicative have features of information gap, choice, and feedback, and they must be guided by the teacher for unrehearsed situations. So it should be genuine, it should be unique. Authentic materials should be used, like newspapers, articles, stories, books, films, and activities are better carried out in small groups in which interaction among students are maximized, especially in the production level. And theory of learning, it's based on three principles like communication, task meaningfulness, pardon, the communication principle, which means activities that involve communication promote language learning. The task principle means activities that involve the completion of real-world tasks promote learning. So you should bring as many real-world tasks as possible into the classroom. And the meaningfulness principle means learners must be engaged in meaningful and authentic language use for learning to take place, rather than a lot of meta language. Do we need to teach meta language, especially if you teach with adults or teenagers? Yes, we do, because without them, they feel that they are just hanging in the air. And the syllabus, discussion of syllabus theory and syllabus models in CLT has been extensive. However, we have seen that one of the first syllabus models to be proposed was described as notional functional syllabus, which means function, the specific purpose for which people communicate, such as requesting, apologizing, promising, arguing, invitation, rejecting, asking prices, etc. Notion, meanings that are expressed through linguistic forms such as time, quantity, space, etc. For example, notion is party. Functions, introductions, greetings, discussion, interest. So students should be exposed to this kind of discourse, language, and they should be able to imitate and produce in the target language as well. And what about the activities? So we have information gap activities. It could be reading, watching, listening, and jigsaw activities, task completion activities like puzzles, games, map reading, information getting activities like surveys, interviews, searches, opinion sharing activities, compare values, opinions, beliefs, information transfer activities like one form, the information presented in one form and represented in another form. For example, there is a text, and by reading the text, they can come up with a list or they can come up with a table. Reasoning gap activities like inferencing, practical reasoning, role plays like role play with you are a waiter or waitress, you are a customer, please try to, service the person or give the service to the person, and games, etc. Spot the difference activity like divide the students into A and B peers, then copy two sets of pictures, so they're just going to tell each other what they can see. And like this, okay, one student will talk about this picture, the other one say, okay, there's a stream on the picture, but in this one there isn't. So they are just going to try to find this differences. For example, this tree has two apples, but in this one there are three apples and one of them is red. Jigsaw activity, as I said, they are based on information gap activity. For example, divide a story into sections. Each student get one section of the story and read it, and students move around the class and by listening to each other, each section, read aloud, decide where in the story the section belong to. Eventually, the students put the entire story together in the correct sequence. What I do in my classes is that, imagine that I have a story of 5 paragraphs. I just cut them into individual paragraphs, and I want students to get into a group of 5. So I just randomly distribute the paragraphs. They read it and they come up with the whole story together. So by this way, they have to negotiate. They try to find which one is the first paragraph, which one is the second paragraph, the third paragraph, etc. And by this way, they also learn cohesive devices like first of all, next, and then in addition, furthermore, to conclude, etc., etc. And what about the role of teachers and learners? The type of classroom activities proposed in communicative language teaching also implied the new roles in the language classroom for both and teachers. Learners are communicators. They participate in classroom activities that were based on a cooperative approach to learning, become comfortable with listening to their peers in group work or pair work tasks rather than relying on teachers or for a model, and expected to take on a greater degree of responsibility for their own learning. So learning responsibility is another role. What about the role of teachers? Teachers are input providers, facilitators, feedback providers. They talk less and listen more, especially during the production activities, assume the role of facilitator and monitor, develop a different view of learners' errors, and develop a different view of her or his own role in facilitating language learning. Other roles assumed for teachers are needs analyst, counselor, and group process manager as well. Uh, Characteristics of communicative methodology. According to Johnson & Johnson, there are 5 core characteristics underlying current applications of communicative methodology. These are appropriateness. Language used reflects the situation, so it's used and must be appropriate to the situation depending on the setting, the roles of participants, and the purpose of communication. Message focus. Learners need to be able to create and understand messages, that is, real meanings. Hence, the focus on information sharing and information transfer in CLT activities. Psycholinguistic processing is another characteristics. CLT activities seek to engage learners in the use of cognitive and other processes that are important factors in second language acquisition. Risk-taking, yes, each time you attempt to communicate, you take a risk to misunderstand or not understand. Learners are encouraged to make guesses and learn from their errors by going beyond what they have been taught. They are encouraged to employ a variety of communication strategies. Free practice, and CLT encourages the use of holistic practice involving the simultaneous use of a variety of subskills rather than practicing individual skills one piece at a time. There are some implications. I think we have talked about them. There is criticism. Being prejudiced in favor of native speaker teachers by demanding a relatively uncontrolled range of language use and expecting the teacher to be able to respond to any or every language problem which may come up. Especially traditional teachers are really disturbed by communicative language teaching. Why? Because they always expect students to produce accurately, which is wrong. It's a wrong strategy. They are going to be accurate by the time. So, as I said, like an affectionate mother, we should wait until the right time. And a basis of group and pair work and less teacher information against education traditions. So some teachers want to hear everyone's speech. No, let them, take their responsibility to communicate. Let them, encourage to say something in the target language, even a word or 2 words, a chunk. So it will start by just like this, drop by drop, it will become a pool. And lack of the explicit teaching of grammar, a consequent loss among students in accuracy in the pursuit of fluency. Yes, that's some people really criticize this, that if the students, taught communicatively, they will have some problems in grammar. That's true. Still, I have some problems in grammar, depending on the situation. But which one is important? Accuracy, fluency. Of course, the balance is the most important thing. But on the other hand, we are not native speakers, and we can have even simple errors or problems in our speech. But my usually understanding is this: can you understand me? If so, there's no problem. Let's go on communicating. Okay, that's enough with this. Now let me talk about some skills. And we usually, when we usually teach, we have skill-based or topic-based syllabus, which means usually we plan what we teach depending on the method we are going to use. And then the teaching process goes on with the methods and techniques that we choose or prefer. And we have assessment and evaluation at the end. So this is the teaching learning process in schools or in any type of teaching or learning environment. So we usually have communication or skill-based teaching learning curriculum or syllabus. So we usually follow multiple syllabus, and nowadays a lot of textbooks follow this, especially British printed or American printed books. I don't know whether you have your national textbooks we have in Turkey. So usually we follow multiple syllabus, which means everything is around the topic, and four skills are encouraged, especially we start with receptive skills and go on with productive skills. Structure is important in order to support skills, structure and vocabulary, and also function. So it's just like a train. So the engine is the topic, and the topic, the others follow the topic. Okay, so what happens? We teach, depending on the level, certain sub skills, receptive skills first. What are they? Prediction, skimming, scanning, referencing. Especially with the A1 level, these four skills are with A1 and A2 levels are reinforced, even information transfer. But later on, when the students move on to B1 level, we also add deducing the meaning of new words from context, inferring opinion and attitude, and especially B2 level and above, we have critical reading or listening, recognizing function, discourse patterns, and markers as well. What about productive skills? We have some tasks to express ideas, opinions in oral or written form, describe a person, for example, an object, a place, narration, define a concept, an idea, or interpret with examples, telling a story or sequence of events as narration, to report an event, an experiment, or scientific fact, to teach the spoken written discourse of English, depending on the topic. So we have integrated skills-based teaching through the units of the chapter or the textbook. So what is it is that you start with leading activity, then we have tasks like skimming, scanning, whatever, I mean, for the receptive skills. Students read, listen, watch for the task, and they do the task on their own. Then they share it as a class, and the teacher gives feedback whether the response is correct or if it's wrong, what's the correct one, and then they discuss together. And that may go on with different tasks with receptive skills. And is it finished? No. After students understand the task and learn new vocabulary or even the structure, then the teacher directs text-related tasks like speaking or writing. So usually it goes around, and usually I prefer, for example, first writing, then they are going to speak with 10 different pairs. Okay, so let me give an example about it. Oh, where is it? Imagine that I have taught a topic about an important event in your life. Students have watched the film and listened to a dialogue or two dialogues about it, and then now it is time to produce. And I tell them that this is my story, and you are going to create your own story. A dog bit me. Can you see it, by the way? Can you see this story? Hello?
No, sir. There's
No.
only the slide of methodological model.
Oh, you can't see this one. Okay. Thank you for the feedback. Oh, I haven't shared it. I'm sorry. Now, is it okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Good. So
Yeah, we can see.
I said, I created this story in line with the textbook that I follow. I said, a dog bit me. And I used colorful coding, especially I wanted them to produce that they are A2 level students. And then I encouraged them, I told them that you are going to use the formula to write this story with this one. What is it? That is, they are going to write with 100 words, with a paragraph, but I want them to talk about fact plus opinion on feeling pattern with cohesive devices. So what does it mean? Especially the red one, the green ones like traffic lights are cohesive devices that we follow, they tell the cohesiveness or coherence in the passage. And the red ones are emotions, we tell our emotions and opinions, and the black ones are the facts. So last weekend, that's the story. I was in the garden with my friends and we were happily playing football. Suddenly, a big dog came in and started to bark continuously and chased me. First, I was scared to death. Then I ran away as fast as I could. But he caught me and bit me on my left leg. After that, I shouted and cried a lot because I fell down and my leg was bleeding. My friends got angry with the dog and sent the dog away by shouting and throwing some stones at him. Later on, they took me to hospital, but I sobbed with helpless rage. In the hospital, the doctor looked at it and put some healing cream on it. In addition, he carefully rolled a bandage on it. Next, I had an injection with some pain too. I was very nervous and sad. I almost cried silently. Finally, I stayed in the hospital for 2 days and it was okay. But I can hardly walk now because it's painful. I usually tell them that, okay, let's just, extract green and red ones and read the story again. That's going to be very boring, tedious. So that's why the opinions and feelings make our story more meaningful. And I believe that they are just going to imitate it initially. But later on, they are just, after certain type of activities, they are going to get competence and they are going to be creative. So usually that's what I believe. Okay. Uh, so I just share it and then I want them to create their own story like this. Then after writing, I don't want them to read it to me. They share the same story with 10 different partners. So we spend even a class hour to share their stories. You know what happens? Everybody speaks at the same time. They listen to 10 other people's stories and they share the same stories. At the beginning, they read it. But after 3 or 4 people, I observe them that they don't read on the paper. They just, tell the story because it's just like cooking. When you cook a food for the first time, well, you just, follow the recipe or somebody's recipe, etc. But if you cook the same food again and again for, let's say, 10 days or a month, then you don't follow the recipe, but you just automatically go on. So that's habit formation in a way. But it's not traditional habit formation, it's meaningful habit formation because you tell a story each time they forget some words or they add something else. I mean, that's human brain, that's creative. Okay. So try to encourage your students to produce depending on what they have read, what they have watched, etc. Now, let me give an example from, first of all, let me finish my presentation with the Subskills. Okay. And in teaching, we deal with subskills of receptive and productive skills. And in testing also, we should teach what we should test what we teach. If you teach 4 skills, then you should test 4 skills. And it's a pity, for example, in Turkey, a lot of teachers don't test 4 skills. They test on reading, vocabulary, and grammar. So what's happening at the end? There is ignorance. Any skill which is not tested is ignored by the students. Because usually students ask in the school, teacher, will you give a test on listening? No. Writing? No. Speaking? No. What are you going to test? I'm going to test on reading, vocabulary, and grammar. Good. So students automatically ignore 3 skills. Then it goes on like this year by year. At the end of the high school education, they can read and understand, but they cannot communicate. So testing has a very important power in this respect. By the way, is there anyone who has taken IELTS or TOEFL test among you? Yes, anybody? Have you taken a TOEFL or IELTS test, international test? No?
No.
Okay, do you know
Yes.
the components of the test? Somebody said yes, who?
Me.
Okay.
Esam.
Okay, so how have you prepared for the test? Have you ignored any skills?
To be honest, a friend paid for me and I didn't prepare at all.
Why? Because you were brought up in the English-speaking country?
No. I was told that I should go with her a week before the exam.
Okay.
I didn't prepare. I looked online. I looked for
Some
YouTube
examples?
videos. Yeah, they focused about the speaking, the listening, especially the listening, because a lot of people faced problems with the headphones. They also didn't mention something that I personally experienced, that I'm gonna pass the exam with many people. So some people were passing their speaking exam while I was passing my listening, and that was very, very confusing and made it very hard.
Yeah. But in fact, I don't know what's happening in Morocco. In Turkey, people have private tutoring about getting ready for the TOEFL exam. Why? Because since listening, writing, and speaking skills are ignored by the teachers in schools, then when they want to take TOEFL exam, they come across 4 skills at a time. Then they are shocked because they are not ready. So what's happening is that this time they try to get private tutoring for listening, speaking, reading, and writing. For example, if you are not a good person, good at writing essays, you cannot be successful in TOEFL test writing section. So then if the teachers, follow this format, I mean, teaching 4 skills and testing 4 skills, students will not be able to ignore any skills. Then we will have positive washback effect rather than negative washback effect. So what I suggest is that any type of test, language test, should cover listening, reading, writing on paper, but also speaking as a separate speaking exam, and it should have equal weight, 25% each. Well, it depends on the school. Again, that's the school policy. Some schools may say listening and speaking will be 20%, but reading and writing are more important, so we will give 30%. So the weight of each skill can change depending on how much time you spend and how many activities you do. And otherwise, if you teach 4 skills and test only one of them, then what's happening is that you distort your own teaching, because students will always ignore your activities in the classroom, because anyway, you are not going to test in the exam. And keep in mind that most of the students learn the second language in schools to be able to pass and be able to be successful. So that leads to washback effect. What does it mean? It's the effect of exam items on students' learning and teachers' teaching tasks. So we have positive washback effect like TOEFL or IELTS, which means 4 skills are tested. But we have also negative washback effect in Turkey. Class exams or Michigan test, for example, it tests on listening, grammar and vocabulary, and they don't test writing and speaking. So which means it has validity of only 50%. And we have some tests in Turkey which is based on only reading, multiple choice. There is even no listening part, and it has 25% validity. So any kind of learning is in terms of phases of learning. We start with listening, reading, receptive skills. Why? Because we want to create comprehensible input with our students. Then there is first attempt to produce in target language through imitation or mechanically. We give a model to the students, then they follow it. I don't know whether you have come across or whether you teach. In my classes, sometimes some student says, teacher, I have nothing in my mind to write, or I have nothing to say. Then I say, okay, look at the model. Please look at the model and tell me what you can say regarding the topic. And if you do similar activities again and again, they have competence in reception and production. Then after having the competence, they become creative in their production as well. So finally, I'm just going to share a textbook with you, a Turkish textbook. It's how it is used in terms of methods. Okay, here we are. Right, can you see it now? Silver lining?
Yes, we can.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yes,
the student
really.
book. It's printed by the state with Turkish flag and a picture of Atatürk, our leader. And if you look at the contents page, we have future jobs. They are all topic-based activities or syllabus, like hobbies and skills. That is A2 level textbook, by the way. I think 10th grade students or 11th, I don't know, follow this one. Hard times, what a life, back to the past, open your heart, facts about Turkey, etc. Okay, maybe it's going to be interesting. Facts about Turkey, that's page 85. Let's go how it deals with the skills. Okay, in Turkey we have a lot of ancient cities, and one of them is Ephesus. That's one of the Greek cities from the before Christ time. I think 5th or 3rd century from ancient Greek time. Okay, so this is the map of Turkey. So what's happening? There is listening, speaking activity. Okay. Then what's happening? The task is the oldest known human settlement is in Istanbul, and 2 of the 7 wonders of the ancient world are in Turkey. Istanbul is the only city located. So what's going to happen is they are just going to read the expressions and guess the true ones. They will just guess. That's just brainstorming, and they get to know, or they will just remember whatever they know from their own schemata. Then the next task is, it says, search the net and find facts about the region you live in. Share them with your classmates. So they're just going to focus on their own region. And guess if the following information about Ephesus is true. And usually students in high school or even this middle school have some, trips to ancient places like this. And there is one in our city, Denizli, that's called Laodicea as well. Then what's happening is that listen to a tourist guide telling about Ephesus to this group, put the sites in the correct order, okay? So depending on what they listen, they are just going to match the picture with the places. So that's listening and matching activity. And they listen again. And by the way, they learn new vocabulary. And first, they are challenged. Then later on, the teacher, provides new vocabulary. Then there is work in pairs and choose one of the historical sites below and talk to your partners using the prompts. So here, there is piece of information. One is in Aydın, Turkey, and the other is in Konya, which is in the central part. And by looking at the information here, they are just going to introduce them to each other. It says working groups find about monument, a historical site that you would like to visit, prepare a presentation on it, including the prompts in exercise 6, it says, and present your work to the class. Sometimes I assign students to do PowerPoint presentation about the places, about their hometowns or the places like this in their vicinity. Then that creates some kind of real agenda for them to be able to communicate. And another activity is read the speech bubbles below and match them with the photos they describe. So that's reading information, maybe skimming, scanning tasks. Then ask and answer questions. Have you ever been to one of the historical sites above? Do you know any other historical sites in Turkey? So that's a kind of, brainstorming. Then vocabulary, choose the closed meaning of the underlined words with the choices. So that goes on like this, anything, and then Göbekli Tepe is another, site in Turkey in the southernmost part of Turkey, which is the first civilization place. I mean, which goes to 12,000 years ago. So these are the monuments remained from 12,000 years ago. So students are going to read it, then do some activity with them. What are the activities? Maybe do these tasks, skimming, scanning, referencing activities. Then there is a communication, pronunciation activity, culture corner, matching, and another listening, speaking. So that goes on like this, as you see. So what's happening through all these activities? They learn new vocabulary, they get the input, then they try to produce. So that's in a circle. Receive it, understand it, digest it, produce it. So by this way, they'll be able to learn to communicate and get ready for real life. That's what they expect. So in this process, the teacher is a guide, the teacher is a facilitator, and the teacher is encouraging the students as much as possible, and also feedback provider. Providing individual constructive feedback is very important so that the student will be able to be aware of what their problems are. And we should also tell the students that you go through some grammar problems, which is normal process. Don't panic, okay? So in this process, the teacher is just like a counselor as well, psychological counselor, so that the student will go through this journey, I say language learning journey, happily with low affective filter, and try to reach the aim about what their objective are. Okay, that's all what I'd like to share today. And if you have any comments or questions, you're welcome, please. Yes, any comments or questions?
Thank you so much, Professor. This was very, very enlightening, and it enabled me to understand the two approaches very well. I have just one question concerning the washback effect. So it can be either positive or negative, depending on how the teacher uses it.
I mean, how the teacher tests or assesses the students. Because if you ignore testing or assessing certain skills, like let's say if you always ignore listening and speaking, students will simply ignore those activities because they won't get any credit for this. This is a liberal world. I mean, if you can sell it on the market, it is valuable. If nobody buys, then it's useless. So it's the same equation with the student's mind. If they can get good marks by doing those activities, then they are going to rehearse it. They are going to spend some time. I mean, they'll keep their mind busy with it. I can see the effect of this I worked in the also language schools to get prepared students for their academic study, because some in universities there are some departments that the medium of instruction is English in Turkey. So in high school they don't get these skills. So in the preparation course we prepare them for example, lecture and note taking, listening and speaking activities, writing essays, etc. So students can easily improve all these skills in 1 year. How? Because they have 25-hour English courses only, and then we ask them in the exam. So they get credit for this. Is that answer? I don't know.
Yes, yeah, it definitely does. Thank you so much, Professor.
Oh, not at all. Anybody else? And by the way, do you teach anywhere at the moment? Do you have any teaching experience? Any of you?
I
Yeah.
used to teach in the American Language Center here in Ujda, and then now I am teaching some courses at the University of Muhammad First.
Okay, so who decides about the exams? You yourself, or there's a
Yes, yes,
body?
me. No, me. I make the exams following what I taught in class.
Okay, then you can easily, experiment this. If you do not, if you ignore some skills in the test, you will see that your students will not improve them. If you, give tests, or if it is part of the test, then you will see that everyone will be particularly focus on these sub skills or skills what you deal with. Okay.
Yes, sir, definitely.
Anybody else? Any teaching experience? Not yet, you say? Okay.
We are actually starting to give classes for students.
And how is it going on now, Suat? Do you follow a course book?
It was actually the first session. The first session was actually just a test, an introductory session with students. Next week, inshallah, we're going to start offering classes for them.
I see.
I mean, lessons.
Okay, so if you just follow topic-based syllabus, sometimes I do this. I mean, especially with lower level learners, I just take let's say 10 topics to the classroom, and I say, okay, which topics you would like to study? Tell me, because in language learning, it's not important which topics you deal with. Usually, the first topic is introduction, introducing yourself, because that's what we do when we meet people. But after that, even they can deal with air pollution or traffic or travel or anything that they're interested. I don't care. So what I do is usually ask majority of students, even they rate which topics they'd like to start with, and then we put them in a sequence and we study together. So my role is to provide activities or find some comprehensible input tasks like watching films, stories, etc., etc. For example, in one classes, they were it was a literature class. They were interested in stories. So we started stories. Let me share one of them, one of the stories with you. It was from YouTube.
Hello, Professor. Thank you for your
Grammarly does more than catch errors. With Grammarly, you can find.
Okay, let me share it with you. How can I share it with you? Okay, now The Little Pianist. The stories were prepared by Indian teachers, and then I have prepared some skimming, scanning, and inferencing, skimming, scanning, referencing tasks with them. So I just give some questions like matching, true, false, or open-ended tasks. So they listen and answer, and they learn a lot of ideas. But it's really nice because it was prepared under the in line with the Suggestopedia, like Lazaro's Suggestopedia, accompanied by the music, just like this.
The Little Pianist by Bridge Kotari. There was once a little boy named Azul.
It is subtitled.
He loved to play the piano and dreamed of becoming a pianist someday. Every Sunday, Azul went to his piano class and practiced every night at home, just before going to bed. Azul became good at it because he was so sincere. He would forget to brush his teeth, but would never forget to practice playing the piano. One day, Vicky, his piano teacher, told him, Azul, you will perform tomorrow in front of a large audience. You are getting to be quite the pianist. Your fingers move like a squirrel on the piano keys. But there is something missing. What is it? Azul just had to know. He really, really wanted to be not just a good pianist, but a great pianist.
Okay, you can watch it on your own later. I don't want to take so much of your time. So this is, dramatized reading, and it's very effective, especially with middle school students or teenagers. And we try to improve their English through stories. So it's up to you. I mean, if they prefer this kind of things. And also I use this with prep program students from the literature department, and they enjoyed watching these kind of things. And I assigned them not to watch only once in the classroom. They should watch the same film throughout the week. Every day, it takes only 10 minutes or so, okay? So I have given them different tasks, like one day just matching activity, another day open-ended task with skimming, scanning. Another day I said, write one paragraph about it. If you were Azul, what would you do? Or summarizing, etc. So by giving different tasks, you keep them busy, but and also it has one function. They keep on listening to the same story, and they get the input. And every day they have clear input. And even they just didn't use the subtitle when they watch it for the 5th time or 6th time. So that's the way we learn.